Welcome to my channel. Trapped, outnumbered, and with only 60 seconds to save the woman who made her a soldier, Phantom faces impossible odds. 6 enemy snipers. 1 target. Every shot could be the difference between life and death. Watch as a street kid turned elite sniper pulls off the unthinkable in a mission that redefines courage, loyalty, and survival. I rested my eye against the scope, the cold metal of my rifle steady against my shoulder, and the sight froze me in place. 6 hostile snipers were perched on rooftops surrounding the abandoned manufacturing complex. Each one had a clear line to the courtyard below, and each one had their sights trained on Colonel Vivian Cross, the woman who had pulled me out of the streets of Detroit and molded me into a soldier capable of feats most could only dream about. Colonel Cross sat tied to a chair in the center of the courtyard, fully exposed, while enemy operatives prepared to broadcast her execution as a statement. My earpiece crackled with the countdown. 1 minute until she died. 1 minute. 60 seconds. She had taught me that combat doesn't hand out second chances. Only the first bullet matters. And now, everything I'd learned under her guidance had led to this. 6 rifles. 1 target. 1 mentor. My pulse steadied. I would not fail her. I grew up in one of Detroit's toughest neighborhoods. My mother, Anna, worked double shifts in a hospital lab, while my father, an ex-Marine named Michael, drowned his frustrations in cheap whiskey. Our small apartment smelled of antiseptic and alcohol. By the time I was 16, I'd learned to navigate alleyways, avoid gang hotspots, and, most importantly, disappear when I needed to. It was during my senior year at Cass Technical High that I first noticed the Army recruiter standing by the gymnasium doors. While everyone else passed by, I lingered. A poster of soldiers in full combat gear caught my eye. Not the uniform, but the look in their eyes. The same look I saw every morning in the mirror: survival. "You thinking about joining?" the sergeant asked. "I'm thinking about leaving Detroit," I said flatly. He smiled, reading the desperation in my tone. "The Army can get you out. But the real question is, are you ready for what comes back?" I locked eyes with him. I've been ready for things you wouldn't believe since I was 12. 6 months later, I shipped off to Fort Benning with nothing but a duffel bag and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, I could become something more than what the streets had written for me. Basic training tore me apart and built me back stronger. Every instructor said I had a natural edge, a predator's instinct for survival and precision. I moved through terrain like a shadow, mastered weapons systems as if they were extensions of my own body, and stayed calm when everyone else faltered. By the time I graduated, I had shattered every shooting record and earned expert status on every weapon I touched. But the one thing that truly defined me wasn't my aim. It was the way I made the impossible look ordinary. My call sign, Phantom, came during my first deployment to Afghanistan in 2018. I had taken a high-value target from a position the enemy never discovered. 1 shot, 1,200 meters through a sandstorm. Invisible, untouchable, ghost-like. The name stuck, whispered across the theaters of operation. But my world shifted during my second deployment, when I first met Colonel Vivian Cross under fire in Syria. That day, she made a choice that would change my life forever, a choice that showed me what real leadership looks like. And now, I was back in action, peering through my scope at the very person who had made me who I was, about to be executed. I had 60 seconds. 60 seconds to make every shot count. 30 seconds on the countdown. 30 seconds to decide who lives and who dies. I adjusted my scope, taking in the rooftops, the angles, the slight sway of each enemy's rifle. My mind went through the calculations instinctively: distance, wind, elevation, bullet drop, mirage. Years of training compressed into the few seconds that mattered most. The closest sniper was on the western rooftop, just 392 meters away. His rifle gleamed in the setting sun. He was scanning for movement, certain he had the advantage. I was the ghost he didn't know existed. I inhaled, slow and deliberate, letting my heartbeat settle into a rhythm that had saved lives more times than I could count. Every shot would have to be perfect. 1 wrong move and Cross wouldn't live to see the next breath. 25 seconds. My finger traced the trigger. The snipers I flicked through his scope, oblivious to me. I let out half a breath and squeezed. The crack of the rifle split the air. His body jerked, then slumped silently behind a low wall. First target neutralized. 20 seconds. Adrenaline surged, but I didn't let it betray me. I slid my view to the northeast rooftop, 518 meters out. Another sniper, his stance confident, ready to end the life of the woman who had changed mine. He was making fine adjustments, unaware his team had already fallen. I exhaled slowly, letting instinct guide me. The shot left the barrel, and the enemy dropped without warning. 2 down. 4 to go? The eastern perch was the third challenge, 630 meters, elevated on a platform with a heat shimmer warping my view. It was a shot that most snipers would hesitate to even attempt. I adjusted for the mirage, for the slight gust from the northwest, and fired. The round hit dead center. Target 3 neutralized. Time felt both infinite and fleeting. Each second counted. I moved my scope to the southeast, 712 meters, the edge of my rifle's effective range. Cross's executioner was lining up, confident that the Americans wouldn't interfere. I was the interruption he didn't see coming. I accounted for wind, distance, and angle. The shot left the barrel, traveling almost 3/4 of a kilometer. Another perfect hit. 4 down. 40 seconds. Only 2 left. The fifth was crouched behind a concrete slab, 438 meters, partially obscured. My patience was my weapon now. A fraction too high or too low would cost everything. I breathed and fired. The bullet threaded the narrow gap, dropping him where he thought he was safe. 5 eliminated. 35 seconds. Only one sniper remained, farthest away, East Perch, 630 meters. He was beginning to realize something had gone terribly wrong. The radio was silent. His eyes darted across the rooftops, confusion spreading across his face. Time slowed. I adjusted my aim, accounting for every variable that could betray the shot. I couldn't fail, not now. The round left the barrel. The last sniper fell. 6 shots. 6 kills. 28 seconds. Silence engulfed the courtyard, broken only by the soft, steady voice in my earpiece. Area secure. Extraction is clear. Phantom, bring her home. I exhaled, a weight lifting from my shoulders. But there was no time to dwell. Cross was still bound, still in danger. I moved quickly, keeping low, slipping through the shadows toward her. Each step reminded me of everything she had taught me: discipline, courage, and the truth that some things are worth breaking the rules for. She had seen my potential when no one else had. Now, I would repay that trust in the only way I knew how. I dropped to the courtyard floor, keeping low, my boots silent against the cracked concrete. The ropes binding Colonel Cross were thick, but my hands had become skilled at undoing knots in situations far more chaotic than this. Every second counted. When I reached her, I knelt beside the chair. Cross lifted her head slightly, meeting my eyes. "Phantom," she whispered, disbelief and relief warring in her voice. "Keep your head down, ma'am. We're getting out of here," I said, cutting through the ropes with swift precision. Her hands were free first, then her legs, and finally she pushed herself up, wobbly but determined. We moved as one toward the exit point I had scouted from my overwatch. My heart pounded, but not from fear. Focus sharpened every sense, every muscle tuned to survival. Cross leaned on me for support, but I let her know without words that she was still in command. Her presence, even weakened, anchored me. We slipped through shadows, past overturned crates and debris, until we reached the wall I had planned to scale. The night air smelled of dust, sweat, and diesel. My hands found purchase, pulling us up and over, landing silently behind cover. "Phantom, how did you?" Cross started, but I shook my head. "Not now, ma'am. We move." We ran toward the rally point, my eyes scanning for movement, every sound amplified in the tense quiet. I could feel her trust in me, heavy and real, and I refused to betray it. Every decision, every calculated risk, was for her. She had invested in me when no one else had seen potential in a kid from Detroit. We reached the extraction vehicle, a modified SUV with reinforced plating. The driver, a young operative I'd coordinated with beforehand, swung the door open. "Get in," I yelled. Cross slid inside, and I followed, keeping my rifle ready even as we moved away from the courtyard. The engine roared to life, but danger wasn't over. The remaining enemy operatives were likely regrouping, radioing in reinforcements. I kept the vehicle between us and the complex, scanning rooftops, anticipating ambush points. Every instinct honed over years screamed at me to stay alert. Cross leaned back, catching her breath. Phantom, I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to, I said. Just stay alive. That's enough. She studied me for a moment, a faint smile breaking through her exhaustion. It reminded me why I had done this. Not for medals, not for glory, but because she had seen who I could be when no one else would. By the time we reached the secure zone, the adrenaline was fading, replaced by a quiet clarity. The mission had been impossible. Yet, somehow, we had made it through. I helped her out of the vehicle, keeping a watchful eye on our surroundings until we were safely inside the perimeter. Inside, Cross turned to me, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but firm. Phantom, you didn't just save me. You honored every lesson I tried to teach you. I swallowed hard, the weight of those words settling over me. You taught me more than tactics, ma'am. You taught me why we do what we do, and that some things are worth risking everything for. For the first time in years, I saw her smile fully, not just a gesture of relief, but one of trust and recognition. That moment cemented something deeper than any medal could. It wasn't about surviving today. It was about the responsibility we carried to protect the people who believed in us and to never let them down. Even as we secured the perimeter, my mind drifted back to the streets of Detroit, to the life I had left behind. People there didn't see potential. They saw survival as a series of compromises. I had learned early how to vanish when danger came, how to read a street like a map, how to keep my head down and still move forward. I was 12 when I realized the world didn't owe me a chance. My father drowned in bottles and bitter memories. My mother barely had time to notice me between shifts. I learned to fend for myself, to disappear into shadows, to become someone who could exist unnoticed. That skill saved me more than once in alleys where being seen meant a scar, or worse. The Army recruiter found me in my senior year. Sergeant Daniels, tall, serious, the kind of man whose presence made you size up your life in an instant, stood by the gym doors at Cass Technical High. He asked if I'd considered joining. I'm thinking about leaving Detroit, I said flatly. He nodded. The Army can get you out. But are you ready for what comes back? I met his gaze. I've been ready for things you wouldn't believe since I was 12. 6 months later, I shipped out to Fort Benning. A single duffel bag, no family looking, no one noticing. Basic training was relentless. Drill instructors tore us down to nothing, then built us back up. But I adapted quickly. I moved through terrain like I belonged there, learned weapons systems instinctively, and, above all, stayed calm when others faltered. I shattered shooting records repeatedly. On every range, every mission simulation, I excelled. But it wasn't just precision. It was the way I approached impossible tasks like they were ordinary. It was strategy, instinct, and patience woven together. My instructors whispered my name long before I earned a call sign. Phantom. It came during my first deployment to Afghanistan. One shot, one high-value target, through a sandstorm at 1,200 meters. The enemy never knew I existed. That single mission created a legend I would later carry quietly with me. But what really shaped me wasn't just my skill with a rifle. It was the people who saw me. People like Colonel Cross. Our paths crossed in Syria during my second deployment. My team had been caught in an ambush, pinned down and bleeding. Chaos reigned. Cross made a decision no one else would. She ordered a hot extraction using assets technically outside her command. She saved everyone, including me. She didn't justify it with regulations. She justified it with morality. I watched her face the inquiry afterward with the same calm determination she had in combat. 12 soldiers testified we lived because of her. Those words sank into me. That day, I understood what leadership truly meant. Not rank, not power, but courage and responsibility. Afterward, she approached me. I've read your service record. Your skills are remarkable. But what matters most is your composure under pressure. I want you in advanced sniper school. I blinked, shocked. Why me? You barely know me. I know enough, she said. I know you pull off miracles when it counts. I know this army needs soldiers who understand that sometimes rules bend for the right reason. That was the moment everything changed. She saw me, truly saw me, for the first time. I wasn't just a kid from Detroit anymore. I was someone with purpose. Advanced Sniper School at Fort Benning was a crucible designed to break you. 9 out of 10 candidates didn't make it through. Every day, I was pushed to the edge, physically, mentally, emotionally. But unlike most, I thrived in chaos. I had been forged in the streets of Detroit. This was just another battlefield, and the rules were different, sharper. From the first day, instructors noticed my calm under pressure. "You move like smoke," one of them said after I completed a reconnaissance exercise in near darkness, scaling terrain that had defeated others. "You think in ways most soldiers don't even understand." I didn't feel exceptional. I just did what I had always done: observe, calculate, and execute with precision. Targets didn't intimidate me, they were puzzles. Each mission, each drill, was a problem to solve. Shooting wasn't just about aim. It was about understanding the environment. Wind, elevation, heat shimmer, and even the faintest vibrations in the terrain could betray a shot. I memorized every variable, ran simulations in my mind, and adjusted instinctively. When other candidates faltered under the pressure of impossible shots, I thrived. One drill remains burned into my memory. 5 targets, 5 locations, all moving, all timed. I cleared them in under 2 minutes, sliding through the mock urban terrain like I was never there. My final shot hit a target 820 meters away, moving under conditions that should have made the hit impossible. The instructor looked at me, jaw tight, disbelief in his eyes. "How did you do that?" he asked. "I've been making impossible shots since I was 18, I said. "This is just the first time someone gave me the gear to do it right." It wasn't arrogance. It was truth. Every moment of my life before the Army, from alleys to rooftops in Detroit, had prepared me for this. Every survival skill, every lesson in patience and observation, became part of my craft. After graduating at the top of my class, Colonel Cross personally made sure I was assigned to the 75th Ranger Regiment. That's where my legend began to grow. Missions that would have broken most soldiers became the benchmarks of my career. High-value targets eliminated, operations executed alone behind enemy lines, precision strikes that no one else could attempt. These became my calling cards. But it wasn't just skill that set me apart. It was strategy, adaptability, and moral judgment. I learned from Cross that success isn't always about following orders. It's about knowing when to bend the rules for the right reason. I carried that lesson into every mission, every engagement. Over the next few years, she stayed close, mentoring me, pushing me further, steering me toward assignments that honed my abilities. She shielded me from the bureaucracy that often crushed soldiers who didn't fit the mold. She knew I wasn't just a marksman. I was a thinker, a problem solver, and someone who could take impossible situations and turn them into victories. By the time my 3rd deployment came around, I wasn't just a soldier. I was a weapon forged in the crucible of my past, sharpened by Cross's guidance, and tempered in the fires of battlefield experience. I had become Phantom, the ghost who could strike unseen, vanish without a trace, and save lives when no one else could. Yet all of that, all of my skill, would be tested like never before the day I looked through my scope at her. The woman who had made me who I was, bound in the courtyard, the enemy's rifles trained on her, and the clock ticking down to her execution. The sun was slipping toward the horizon, and the abandoned manufacturing complex looked more like a death trap than ever. Dust swirled in the courtyard below, kicked up by gusts from the northwest. 6 enemy snipers had their sights locked on Colonel Cross. Each one was experienced, disciplined, and lethal. My heartbeat didn't accelerate. I welcomed the challenge. This was what I had been trained for. I moved to my overwatch position, careful to keep my silhouette hidden against the crumbling concrete walls. My custom-built M24 rested against my shoulder, each match-grade round hand-loaded by me, each one a promise of precision. Every detail of the courtyard, every rooftop, every shadow was imprinted in my mind. I started with the closest sniper, crouched on the western rooftop, just 392 meters away. The man shifted slightly, unaware that death had already found him. I adjusted my scope for wind and elevation, steadying my breath. 30 seconds on the countdown. I squeezed the trigger. The shot left the barrel with a whisper of controlled thunder. The sniper jerked and fell behind cover. First target down. 25 seconds left. My eyes scanned to the northeast rooftop, 518 meters. Another sniper, confident and precise, lining up for Cross's execution. I accounted for his partial cover, and the slight gusts against his scope. Bang! 2 down. The eastern platform, 630 meters, was next. Heat shimmer warped the image, making the target appear to float slightly above the roof. I paused only for a fraction of a second, corrected my aim, and fired. Another perfect hit. 3 down. Tom was bleeding fast. I shifted my focus to the southeast, 712 meters, the edge of my rifle's effective range. I visualized the shot in my mind, compensating for mirage, wind, and subtle movement. The round left the barrel and hit dead center. 4 down. 40 seconds. The fifth sniper crouched behind a low wall for 138 meters, only his head visible. I threaded the bullet through the narrow gap, and he fell silently. 5 down. 35 seconds. Only one remained. Far east, 630 meters, beginning to realize something had gone horribly wrong. His radio was silent. Confusion spread across his face as he scanned the rooftops. I exhaled slowly, lined up the shot, and fired. The last sniper dropped. 6 shots. 6 kills. 28 seconds. Silence. The courtyard was still, broken only by the soft, controlled voice of Cross over the radio. Area secure. Extraction is clear. Phantom, bring me home. I allowed myself a brief glance at her through my scope. She was alive, trembling but unharmed, and it was enough. Every second of training, every impossible shot I had ever taken, had led to this moment. No one would ever know the precision, the split-second calculations, the risks I had taken to save her. And I didn't care. All that mattered was that she was alive. I moved toward her position, keeping low, every step calculated. Shadows and debris became my allies. This was more than a rescue. It was repayment for the faith she had placed in me when no one else would. I dropped to the courtyard floor, boots silent against the cracked concrete, keeping every muscle tense and ready. Cross's chair sat in the middle, ropes tight around her wrists and ankles. I knelt beside her, working quickly, my fingers moving over knots like they had been memorized. Phantom, she whispered, her voice trembling but steady. Relief cutting through fear. Keep your head down, ma'am. We're getting out of here, I said, cutting the last rope. Her hands and feet were free. She rose slowly, leaning on me for support. I could feel the weight of her trust, and I refused to betray it. We moved through the shadows I had scouted hours earlier, weaving between overturned crates and debris. The complex was a maze, a trap designed to slow anyone who tried to escape. But I had anticipated every angle, every possible line of sight. Years of training had prepared me for this, not just with weapons, but with planning and instinct. We reached a wall I had chosen as our exit point. I scaled it first, pulling her up after me. The drop on the other side was rough, but we landed quietly behind cover. The night air was thick with dust and tension, every second a potential death sentence if I miscalculated. Phantom, how did you even know I was here? She asked, her voice soft, almost incredulous. Not now, ma'am. Focus on getting clear, I said. Every step I took was calculated, every movement designed to protect her. She had seen potential in me when no one else did, and I would not let that faith go unfulfilled. We moved toward the extraction point, the rally spot where I had coordinated a vehicle pickup. My eyes scanned every rooftop, every shadow. Even the smallest movement could be the difference between life and death. The vehicle was waiting, engine rumbling quietly, ready for the escape. I helped Cross inside first, then slid in behind her. My rifle rested across my lap, scanning the perimeter, alert for any threat. The complex faded behind us as we drove, but danger wasn't over. I kept the vehicle between us and potential reinforcements, anticipating every ambush point. Cross leaned back, catching her breath. Her usual commanding presence was tempered with exhaustion. Phantom, you didn't just save me, she said. You did something I didn't think anyone could. You don't have to thank me, ma'am. Just stay alive. That's enough, I replied, keeping my eyes on the road ahead and the darkness around us. By the time we reached the secure zone, I helped her out of the vehicle, still keeping watch. Every instinct screamed at me that the mission wasn't over until we were truly safe. Cross turned to me, studying me as though seeing me for the first time. Phantom, you've grown into more than a soldier. You've become someone I can trust with anything. I let her words sink in, but didn't respond immediately. Actions mattered more than words. All I did was nod, letting her know silently that she was safe and that the mission had been a success. For the first time, I realized the full weight of what she had taught me. Not just marksmanship, not just strategy, but loyalty, responsibility, and the courage to do what others could not. That bond, forged in fire and trust, had carried both of us through a situation most soldiers would have deemed impossible. Back inside the secure zone, I finally allowed myself to breathe. Colonel Cross was sitting across from me, her hands wrapped in bandages, her uniform torn and dust-streaked. She looked at me, not just as a soldier, not just as a protege, but as someone she had shaped and trusted with her life. "You know," she began quietly, "I thought I was just training a sniper when I pushed you into advanced school. I didn't realize I was building a guardian." I let her words sink in. She had seen me, believed in me, and guided me through the impossible. All of my instincts, every long-range calculation, every risky maneuver. It was the culmination of years of her mentorship. "Ma'am," I said softly, "you didn't just teach me how to fire a rifle. You taught me why it matters. You showed me that some things are worth risking everything for." She smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and relief. "You've grown more than I could have hoped. Not just as a soldier, but as a person. You carry responsibility like few can, and you've proven that loyalty and courage aren't just words, they're actions." Her words reminded me of the early days at Fort Benning, of every impossible shot, every mission that required me to bend rules and think beyond the manual. I realized that everything I had endured, the streets of Detroit, the ambushes in Syria, the training that had nearly broken me, wasn't just preparation for combat. It was preparation to protect someone who had once protected me. Over the next hours, we debriefed, recounting the operation in meticulous detail. I explained how I had taken down each sniper, why I had chosen specific sequences, how I had accounted for every variable. Cross listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally raising an eyebrow in admiration. "You calculated everything perfectly," she said finally. "Not just the shots, but the entire approach. You didn't just save me. You made it look effortless, and in doing so, you set a new standard for what a soldier can achieve under impossible conditions." I shook my head. "I didn't do it alone. You taught me the discipline, the patience, and the courage to make the decisions no one else would. I only executed what you prepared me to do." She reached out, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. "And that's exactly why I trust you. You don't just follow orders. You think, adapt, and act when it counts most. That's rare. That's exceptional. That's leadership." I stayed quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. I knew that my journey wasn't over. Every mission, every challenge ahead, would test me again. But for the first time, I felt an unshakable certainty. I could face anything, because I had learned not just how to survive, but how to protect those who depended on me. That night, as the secure zone settled into tense silence, I found a quiet corner and pulled out a notebook. I began writing, documenting every lesson, every thought, every calculation. Not for recognition, not for medals, but so that, someday, I could pass on what I had learned, not just as a sniper, but as someone who had been given a chance to make a difference. Because what Cross had taught me went far beyond the battlefield. It was about loyalty, responsibility, and the courage to act when others could not. And I intended to honor that for the rest of my life. The flight back to base was quiet. Colonel Cross sat across from me, still recovering, her eyes thoughtful as she stared out the small window at the desert fading beneath the night sky. I stayed beside her, silent, letting her process the events that had just unfolded. When we landed, the medics and command staff were waiting. Everyone knew the mission had been high risk, and the news of our survival spread through the ranks like wildfire. Yet, despite the accolades and attention, I remained focused on the fact that Cross was alive, unharmed, and still leading. That was my victory. The debrief was intense. Every shot, every movement, every calculation was scrutinized. I answered questions with precision, outlining the exact sequence of events that had allowed me to neutralize 6 snipers in under 30 seconds. Some of the officers seemed incredulous. The operation had skirted the line of what many would call impossible. But Cross stood beside me, a silent pillar of support. When an officer questioned my decision to act without formal orders, she spoke with authority and conviction. "This soldier achieved the mission objective while safeguarding lives," she said firmly. Her actions exemplify moral courage and tactical brilliance. Following protocol isn't always the same as serving our country. Sometimes, doing what is right requires taking calculated risks. Her words carried weight, and the room fell silent. The reprimand I had initially feared dissolved into acknowledgement and respect. The medal recommendation came swiftly. Later, in a private office, Cross turned to me with a faint smile. "You could have followed orders, waited for backup, done everything by the book," she said softly. "Instead, you saved me. You made the impossible look inevitable." I shook my head. "You taught me that sometimes doing what's right clashes with what's authorized. And when it does, you choose what's right and accept the consequences. You saved me once, now I return the favor." Her eyes softened, a rare vulnerability behind her usual composure. "You've grown into someone I can trust with anything," she said quietly. "Not just as a soldier, but as a human being who understands that leadership is about protecting people, not just issuing commands." That night, I sat alone in my quarters, reflecting on everything that had led to this moment. From the streets of Detroit to sniper school, from ambushes in Syria to impossible long-range shots, every step had been preparation. Every lesson Cross had imparted, the discipline, the strategy, the moral compass, had been tested and proven. I pulled out a pen and began writing a letter, one I would never send, but needed to articulate for myself. "Colonel Cross, you pulled me from a life where survival meant nothing more than avoiding trouble. You saw potential when no one else did. You taught me that leadership is about loyalty, courage, and the willingness to do what others cannot. Every mission I undertake, every decision I make, I carry your lessons with me. You didn't just train a sniper. You built someone capable of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. I owe you everything, and I will honor that debt in every action I take." The words felt inadequate, but they were the closest I could come to expressing the depth of my gratitude. She had given me more than a career. She had given me purpose. As I set the pen down, I realized that this mission, though harrowing, had closed a circle. It wasn't about medals or recognition or even survival. It was about trust, loyalty, and the courage to act when no one else could. And in that, I had learned the true meaning of what it meant to be Phantom. The weeks after the mission passed in a blur of ceremonies, reports, and quiet moments of reflection. I was awarded the Silver Star for extraordinary heroism, but the medal itself never felt like the reward. The real honor came from Colonel Cross, who handed me a small unit citation, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of pride and unspoken understanding. "For showing that the best soldiers know some things matter more than following orders," she said simply. Those words carried more weight than any decoration. They acknowledged the bond forged over years of training, mentorship, and trust. Back at base, I began preparing for my next assignment, though my thoughts often drifted to Detroit, to the streets that had shaped me, and to the path that had led me here. I realized that the lessons I had learned, the patience, the observation, the courage to act, weren't just skills for combat. They were life lessons, principles that guided me in every decision I made. Cross remained close, mentoring me not just as a soldier, but as someone entrusted with the responsibility to teach others. "Leadership isn't just about giving orders," she told me one evening, the desert sunset painting the sky behind her. "It's about protecting people, guiding them, and knowing when to take risks for the right reasons. You've done that. Now it's time to help others do the same." I nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The missions I would take in the future weren't just about success. They were about legacy. About shaping soldiers who could think, adapt, and act when the impossible demanded it. About instilling the courage to protect the people who trusted them. On my last night in Iraq before reporting to the Sergeant Major Academy in Texas, I wrote a letter to Cross, trying to capture the enormity of what her guidance had meant to me. "Colonel, you pulled me off the streets and gave me a reason to exist. You showed me that leadership isn't about rank. It's about loyalty, courage, and the willingness to act when it matters most. Every mission I take, every choice I make, I carry your lessons with me. You didn't just train a soldier. You built someone who understands that skill carries responsibility, and that one person can change the outcome when it counts. I will honor your faith in me for the rest of my life." The journey from Detroit to this moment had been anything but ordinary. I had learned that survival alone wasn't enough. Greatness required responsibility, courage, and a willingness to risk everything for the people who depended on you. I had been forged in hardship, sharpened in training, and tested in impossible missions. And now, I had the chance to pass those lessons on. Colonel Cross had once said she thought she was shaping a sniper. She didn't realize she was building a guardian. That guardian now had the chance to shape the next generation, to ensure that loyalty, courage, and moral strength remained at the heart of every mission. As I prepared to leave Iraq for Texas, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never forget the woman who had seen potential in a lost kid from Detroit. I would carry her lessons into every mission, every training exercise, and every decision I made. Phantom wasn't just a name. It was a promise to protect, to serve, and to honor the faith others placed in me. And in a world where loyalty is too often just a word, I had learned that it could be a way of life. I had become the kind of soldier Colonel Cross had always believed I could be, a protector, a strategist, a guardian of lives. And that was a legacy far greater than medals, accolades, or recognition. Some debts can't ever be fully repaid, but they can be honored. And for me, the greatest honor was living by the lessons she had taught me and ensuring that others could do the same. Because sometimes the impossible isn't impossible, it's necessary. And sometimes the greatest act of courage is protecting the people who made you who you are.